Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sarah Smith here on the Sarah Speaks podcast, and I just thought I would play a little bit of catch up and do a video about the Helen Clark event that I went to last week, discussing the COVID response in New Zealand and internationally. And I drove down to Tauranga for the event after work. I left at 4:30 and the traffic was horrendous. It was a stormy, rainy day and I really didn't want to go, but I had already paid my $40 for the ticket, so I just jumped in the car after work and I ended up being half an hour late because the traffic was so bad and the rain. But by the time I got to the Holy Trinity Church in Tauranga, Helen Clark had already been speaking, probably for roughly, probably about 20 minutes. And by the time just as I got there and found my seat, she started talking about the whole COVID thing. And there's probably about, I reckon, 350 people there. So it was a reasonable turnout. And I have written a couple of posts about it already, and I will write some more. But I just also thought I would do a little video to update you all, because most of you will know that Helen Clark, our former Prime Minister of New Zealand, is also a globalist and very much connected to the United Nations. She didn't quite get the top job when she ran for it, but she's very much involved, and she's very much involved with Jacinda Ardern, our current Prime Minister, grooming her. And I've always suspected since Jacinda Ardern was coming up the ranks that she was going to be groomed to be the next Secretary General of the United Nations. And by the looks of it, that is the way that they're heading if they get their way. She's very much got an international reputation now, and it was very evident when she became Prime Minister that she was put on every international magazine, and did her tours of the chat shows in the US, and she was definitely given an international platform very, very quickly. So just getting back to this event with Helen Clark, she was talking about COVID-19 and how the high to middle income countries have been the hardest hit, but however the International Monetary Fund could only help the lowest 25 countries. And she was also talking about how there was now talk in financial circles that they were wanting to wipe the debt from countries around the world. And she talked about increasing fiscal space. I mean, I'm not an economist and I don't know all the technical terms, but by wiping the debt, this would leave more room for people to take on more debt, I suppose, ironically. And she used some language which I thought was very much the New World Order language, and she kind of couched it in a way as if to say, it would all be kind of an accident, what was happening in terms of the crisis. So we're obviously, from their point of view, in a health crisis, and this would then go on and lead into a financial crisis, and then that financial crisis would lead to a social crisis, and ultimately it would lead to a peace and security crisis. And if you're looking at it from a global New World Order point of view, this is their whole classic problem, reaction, solution. So they've created the health problem with this Wuhan bioweapon that they introduced, and ironically enough, Wuhan is partying it up. They're having a good old time, while the West is looking at locking down again. So, and then obviously the financial crisis, which was already technically underway. If you talk to different financial experts, I'm sure they'll be able to tell you a lot better than what I could that we never really recovered properly from the 2008-2009 financial crisis, although Helen Clark did actually go on to say that we were able to bail out a lot of people during that crisis because it was actually Gordon Brown that went around raising, I think it was $1 trillion for the bailouts, and now he's looking at raising 2.5 trillion, but for some reason that's not possible. So so they've got the health crisis, then they've got the financial crisis, and then of course there'll be the social crisis. So you've got the social housing crisis, you've got the crisis of the food supply that they're creating. Obviously, here in New Zealand the primary industries are just suffering immensely, and you've got the recent example of the courgette grower who just could not get the pickers, so his crops are going to waste, and that story will just we'll hear more and more of those stories, and that's all a created problem because they want to obviously get people off the land and push them into the cities and get people eating their fake food, their fake vegan meats and their 3D printed foods and their lab grown fake meats, genetically modified and all that jazz. So, and then once you've got a social crisis and you've got a starving population, you'll obviously get a lot of societal unrest, and and at that point, who knows what will happen. They could technically bring in the UN troops. Some people say that they've already seen UN troops in this country. So because hopefully New Zealand's own armed forces and New Zealand's own police won't go as far as to take it to the extreme, because they are still, ultimately our flesh and blood, whereas, you bring in outside forces and they're much more likely to bring the hammer down on populations that they have no connection to. So then she actually said that the World Health Organization never actually recommended a travel ban, which was, in the beginning, Trump was pretty quick to join in on that, and New Zealand did put a travel ban on China at the beginning of February and Iran, and then in mid to late May we put a travel ban on everybody except for returning citizens. So New Zealand obviously followed the Stamp It Out strategy rather than a management strategy, and she went on to say that the coronavirus, like COVID-19, is highly transmissible and it's not just a flu, and she was very much promoting the masks, testing and tracing, and she said that we had to keep at it for quite a while. So she wasn't painting a pretty picture that we'd get back to life as normal pre-COVID anytime soon. And she said that 25% of our export dollar had been wiped out, and 20.5% was from tourism, and 5% was from the international students. So she was talking about getting the international students back, and she was talking about a vaccination certificate or people having an antibodies test. So that's how we could allow students in. And then she mentioned that New Zealand should transition to our waitlist sectors, so the smart sector, online sector, information communication technologies, and when it came to food production, it should be less about commodities and more about added value. So she was very much promoting the redesign of New Zealand, and she said that we should be leading the reset conversation. And then that's when she brought in the climate change narrative. So she's very much promoting climate action, getting our economy to a 100% renewable economy, looking at getting a electric vehicle fleet, and she was suggesting that the current government should actually set firm dates and targets for these actions, and also that we needed to have a zero waste to landfill system, and of course, just general sustainability. So there you can see that the climate change narrative is being used and being brought in under the guise of this this COVID pandemic. And she talked about upskilling people. She didn't really elaborate too much on that, and she talked about housing for low-income people, and that's where you get the Green Building Council coming in and the sustainable housing projects that they are basically setting up to fail all around the world. And I will talk a little bit more to Carol Sakey about that tomorrow, hopefully. And she said that 2021 will still be very difficult because the virus is raging outside of New Zealand, all around the world. And she said that Dr. Fauci predicted that 100,000 a day would be testing positive to COVID, and she said that on that Thursday, I think, or that week anyway, they had just hit that figure. And she said that next year we could look at getting the vaccine, and she was questioning who would get it, and that there'd need to be conversations around that. Would they be frontline workers, essential workforce, border workforce, the elderly and the vulnerable? And she said that, we wouldn't be able to restore confidence in travel until we got the vaccine up and going, and that we shouldn't expect things to snap back. And then she did the whole, fake compassion thing of lockdowns have been so tough for many people. Yeah, so it was all lots of, United Nations sustainability rhetoric, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. And then they had another golden child, a golden girl for New Zealand, Teresa Gatting. And she, for those of you who don't know her, she used to be the CEO of one of New Zealand's biggest telcos, Telecom, which is now called Spark. And Teresa Gatting talked about 5 trends, and she talked about the Internet of Things. So this was not in a technical sense, but more, so not, how they're going to set up the smart homes and have everything hooked up to 5G, and you can, talk to all your appliances, and all your appliances talk to themselves and talk to one another. Not that setup, but literally that basically everyone would be doing everything on the internet. For example, My Food Bag, which she's got, she set that up, that company up, which was also predicted a long time ago that these kind of companies would roll out all around the world. So basically people would be in their homes and they would never have to leave, and everything would be delivered to their door, and how wonderful that would be. So again, COVID was a great business opportunity for her, and she said that, they were getting 100 new customers every hour, and then after 10 days to 2 weeks of that level of demand, they just couldn't meet their demand. So they just said that that's just continued to shift upwards permanently. So yeah, she did very well financially under COVID. And yes, so she talked about how the online economy will solve a lot of problems that we experience in the physical world. And then the other trend was online. Another part of that was the online healthcare, and that's a big thing all around the world apparently, even though it's only new here in New Zealand, but it's been available globally for a long time. And so she said that before COVID, only 10% of people would be interested in talking to their doctor online, but after COVID, it was 76% of people. So you can see again that COVID is really getting public support and public mandate for a lot of these policies and a lot of these business trends that they've been in the works for many, many years. It's not new, and they are using COVID as a good excuse to change society, as we know. So she talked about side hustles. Everyone wants a side hustle these days, and this is very much a trend within, female circles, or for women. They all kind of want some sort of side hustle, and you get these what are they called? Pyramid schemes, basically these network marketing companies popping up left, right and centre to get women online, kind of trying to hustle wares or clothes or oils or vitamins and minerals, whatever, you name it. They've now set up these good systems where and when I say good, I mean bad, because they just, I almost got pulled into a network marketing system, and yeah, I didn't like it one bit. So the second trend, she said, is that we are all in this together. This whole element of we did lockdown together. We have just elected the most radically diverse government. And that, that's when more of the left-wing liberal Marxist socialist ideologies were just getting rolled out. Our government has this great intersectionality, the feminist, the Maori Renaissance, the gay pride, the gender fluidity, all the buzzwords. And she's also the New Zealand executive officer for SheEO in New Zealand. So that seems to be, I've had a quick look into it, and it's like another kind of New World Order company or support group, I don't know how they frame it anymore, but they basically want to help women get into business, and they've got all these collaboration models, and it all sounds very lovely, and females can get loans for their businesses, and because venture capital funding only goes to a small percentage of women, and it's again, they use all this great wording, but what's it doing to the family? What's it doing to women and their sense of community? And I just don't like the dynamic that it's creating. And she made a big deal about how the fact that 40% of investors into the venture capital for SheEO and Archangels, which is another investment firm only for females, I think that was. Yeah, so 40% of the people giving money are actually men. So it's all about trying to balance masculine and feminine in the world and within ourselves. Yeah, and again, she was bringing in like the spirituality. I just found it so interesting how it's again the New World Order taking little bits of truth here and there to fit their narrative, and it just sounds amazing. It's kind of 95% truth, wonderful, but then it's the 5% that they're gonna put in there that will actually ultimately in the end take away our freedoms and create this transhumanist technocratic state where it's the corporations versus the poor, basically the proletariat. And what people like Helen Clark and Teresa Gatting don't know is that they're just useful idiots, really, at the end of the day. And so number 3 was business. I'm just trying to read that word there. So this whole idea of rest and quiet cultivation of mind, body, soul, and spirit, and land, and so just bringing health back to business, and bringing wellness back to business, and this whole, she talked about again how lockdown had its good sides, and it brought families together, and it showed us how we could interact with the natural environment, and wasn't it great how there weren't very many cars, and all about bringing us back into right relationship with our food, with the environment, on how to earn an income, how to spend and use wealth. And again, very lovely wording, and it all, on one level it makes huge sense, because yes, we all want to be back in balance with nature, and with God, and with one another, and with the animals, and but behind it we know what's driving it. And so she talked about bringing all that kind of thing into the national reset conversation, and that's when they made a few comments about how Pelosi said Jacinda was amazing, and isn't Paddy Gower just amazing with his coverage from over in America. You can imagine how I was feeling at that point. And so the 4th trend was that home is where the heart is. And I just cringed when I heard this, because I feel exactly like that resonates so much with me, that statement. And I've had, my own business ideas around even using that phrase, and just to hear her use that. This woman, like, she's had no children. Helen Clark's had no children, and they're just using all these amazing sentiments, but they're very hollow. So she said that under lockdown, just so many people were doing up their homes, and that there was just the domestic consumption went up with everyone wanting to catch up with jobs around the home. So that was the fourth trend. And the fifth trend was creating a new experience of work. So she was saying that projections had been that the best case scenario was 10% unemployment, and so she said with our 4.5% unemployment we weren't doing very bad at all. And she said that lockdown had actually given people the opportunity to pivot. So that was a new word for me, pivoting. A business is where you basically, so for example, she used the example of Trelise Cooper, who usually has a massive sale at one point during the year, and because of COVID she could not have this massive sale, so instead she pivoted and she put it online, and apparently it just went through the roof and sales were amazing. So it's all about turning a negative into a positive, really, I suppose, and making the best out of a bad situation. So she then again went on to bring in this very kind of new agey spiritual rhetoric, which was all about co-creation, and it's all about intention. However, intention isn't the whole story. So I just again thought it was very, very interesting how they know how to speak to everybody, and they know the key words to use to get people on board. And so you can easily see how she's speaking to women, and a lot of these, again, like how I was talking before, these businesses that are aimed at women, or these investment companies that are aimed at women, they very much appeal to the feminine, and appealing to working collectively and co-creating, and that whole team spirit of the female, which back in the day, and even only a generation or two ago, was part of society. And I've talked about this before, how women are the glue that holds society together. And we would arrange the community get-togethers, or we do the family events, or we're kind of we're community based, and so they definitely know how to tap into women. And then she talked about how that it was a paradox, because there was a rise of the female and a rise of leadership. So how are we going to kind of see that manifest in the world? And we know how we're seeing that, because we know that the New World Order is lifting women and encouraging women to act like men, basically. And she just again was talking about, and this just made me cringe again, about how they actually talk about how wonderful the female leaders were around the world. Jacinda Ardern, and they mentioned New South Wales, Queensland having female premiers, and how well they handled COVID compared to Melbourne. So again, male bashing, which I'm just totally over the male bashing in this country and around the world. And she said that the 3 largest iwi CEOs in this country are women, which I didn't know that. And so they brought up the suffragettes, and how amazing that was, and how women got the vote in New Zealand first, and despite apparently Seddon being a sexist Prime Minister. So that's all the we that is embedded deeply into our DNA. So the collective, again, driving the collective. And then just bringing up how domestic violence went through the roof during lockdown, and how there was this new breakthrough idea that instead of the woman having to go to the woman's refuge with the children, that now they would start looking at taking the man out of the home. So there you go, that's another New World Order agenda right there, is getting the man literally out of his own home. And yeah, it was just it's just heartbreaking to actually hear all of these things coming out of the mouth of these globalist mouthpieces, basically. And she said, never think that your voice is so small it doesn't count. And I thought, gee, that's ironic, because if you're conservative, or, you know, even if you've just got a MAGA hat sitting in your office, you know, you get shut down. So that's kind of gaslighting, because, yeah, your voice doesn't count if it goes against the narrative, but they're trying to say that your voice does count. And she even said, let your heart guide you. I just couldn't believe it. Like, it was just so... I just felt like throwing up. Yeah. It was so embarrassing. Yeah, so was that number 5? Was that the 5th trend? The trend, the new work experience. So yeah, the whole getting us back into the home, basically. So that was a big thing that they discussed about how more and more people would now be more and more comfortable working from home, and they wouldn't need to go back to the office. And a lot of those office spaces are actually, the commercial, the commercial real estate owners will be struggling, because a lot of businesses have changed. They've pivoted the way they run their offices. And then, she just kind of went on to say that the economy obviously took a real hit, and she said 40% of the economy was operating under level 4, and then 2/3 of the economy was operating at level 3. And she was talking about Bluetooth technology and how that would really work to modernise the tracking of transmission. So it was very much Bluetooth tracking systems that were being promoted, and as I said earlier, the vaccination certificate, and also antibodies if you can prove that you've had it. What else? Just quickly looking here. So there was a question actually at the end. So unfortunately, questions were submitted prior to the event starting, which I missed that. So unfortunately, I didn't get to ask my question, which was going to be asking Helen Clark, now that the World Health Organization had a doctor come out and say that lockdowns were no longer the most viable option to solving COVID, and that actually it would create more poverty and more issues. How did she see that new piece of information influencing New Zealand policy around lockdowns? Yeah. So, and I did think, should I go and ask her at the end? But the line was quite long, and I had a big drive to go back to Auckland, so I didn't really feel like waiting around. So, but yeah, somebody did ask about Trump, and they both kind of very diplomatically avoided that question in a lot of ways. And the interesting thing that Helen Clark did say, though, was that we needed a broad basket of trading partners, and she did suggest that we were actually now too close to China, and that we needed to rebalance our trading relationships, and perhaps look more to Japan and Malaysia and Europe. So I thought that was interesting. But obviously she said that the US and New Zealand still needed to keep a good relationship. And also she said Australia was very important as well. So, yeah, and that's when she talked about Gordon Brown encouraging the G20 meeting this month to sort out resources through the IMF and the World Bank, and that would help. That money would go to basic infrastructure and keeping our most important essential services going, our teachers, our midwives, our nurses, which ironically or not ironically, as it were, probably planned, but they are, they've got high female, they've got a high, they're just, most teachers, midwives and nurses are females these days. You don't get that many men in those fields. And again, bringing up the sustainability goals, the eradication of extreme poverty before 2030. They actually said that, and that poverty would actually increase this year, and that we would see hunger on the rise these next 3 to 4 years. And poor countries were being hit by climate change, and that there was a lot of forced migration because of droughts and things like that, and people were being pushed out of the countrysides and into the margins of cities. And she brought up the example of Afghanistan when she went over there with World Vision and UNICEF, and she talked about the tent cities and the 250,000 displaced people due to drought. And so you can see that, with the use of geoengineering and weather manipulation technology, which they do have, and you can go online and find the patents for that, they can create these droughts, and they can create the illusion of what they like to call man-made climate change. And it is man-made, but not the way we think it's man-made, like from our industrialization of cows or our cars or our pollution, basically. So she just went through that example anyway, and talked about how climate change was increasing our social issues. And they also went on to talk about how that our problems should not be considered insular for the government, and that we needed to look outside of New Zealand and really help a lot of people outside of New Zealand, and especially women and girls getting education through these charities. And after all, this event was a charity fundraiser for the Cambodian Charitable Trust, which they had both been part of for a long time. So I just thought it was very ironic that there was Helen Clark and Teresa Gatting, and then the representative woman from the charity. That there was, they always talk about diversity, and I just thought it was ironic that there was these 3 women. 2 of them had no children, and they were trying to tell the third world how they should educate their children, educate their girls particularly, and how they should run their countries. So it's all about educating the children, and especially trying to educate the girls, because the majority of the time families would try and educate the boys, because obviously that is more important to get the man earning a good wage, and then the woman would get married and have children and raise a family. And of course to them that is a bit of a problem. And so this is still during question time. They were talking about pivoting again and cashing in on COVID-19 through the vaccine and the certification of the vaccine to say that you've had it, or you can show antibodies. And they thought that there was good opportunity to pivot by scaling up quarantine and pre-departure testing, and then testing on arrival and in quarantine. And then this is the way that they could bring back international student travel and creating travel bubbles. So it seems that this quarantine business will become a business, and they will offer more kind of luxurious quarantine opportunities for people who want to pay for a more luxurious experience. And we needed to reimagine things differently, and we needed to leverage on what we had, and to be careful and sensible. So to me that was they were actually talking about, I think, tourism at that point, so doing high-end tourism. So that was pretty much the talk, and then the few questions that they had at the end. So ultimately my little analysis of it would be that it was very much a globalist layout of their plan for here in New Zealand, which was very much hook us up to the internet and get us into an internet-based society, get us out of the mindset of being patriotic, and get our mindset also focusing on outside of New Zealand and how could we help people outside. and also obviously the sustainability goals and carrying on the United Nations sustainability plan. So that was where they were ultimately heading, and it was very much female based, and the whole feminist narrative was coming through, and just complete liberal Marxist socialist identity politics coming through, very obvious to someone looking through my lens. And I didn't wear my MAGA hat, surprisingly enough. I didn't really want to trigger anyone, and but I was definitely felt like, okay, everyone in the room supported Helen Clark and Teresa Gatting. They were very much on board. I didn't get the sense that there was anybody there to question the narrative as such, and I certainly didn't have the courage to do any heckling at that point. So I behaved myself, and then I caught up with a friend for a coffee before making the big drive back to Auckland. So it was a 6-hour return trip, and I'm glad I did it. I told a few people that I was going, and they just thought I was absolutely bonkers. But for me, it's really important that we are there to witness these people, and we are there to hold them accountable. And maybe, as my confidence grows and as I feel like this information is wanted, and if there is a need or a desire for my work to continue, then who knows? I don't know where it'll take me. I'll just let kind of it all unfold as it's supposed to, and hopefully I'll be in the right place at the right time for whatever it is that I need to do. But that's my little summary of my little trip down to Tauranga to see the globalists unveil their plans. Not that it's a secret or that it's anything new to any of you, but I just wanted to hear it straight from the horse's mouth and be there for the people to report back to you and tell you exactly what happened, rather than through another source or through mainstream media. So it's all what you would imagine them to say. It was nothing surprising, nothing new. But like I say, I just wanted to witness it and report back to you. So thank you so much for listening. This video's gone on actually a lot longer than I expected it to. But hey, that's the way of it, isn't it? I wanted to do it justice. So hopefully you've got something out of this, and take care out there. Stay strong, patriots. Where we go, one we go all, and the best is yet to come. Talk to you again soon. Bye.